Hi there, and welcome to Ian's Engage channel. I'm Ian. In previous videos, I've showed how I've created various test tracks, as I've strived to puzzle out how I'm going to construct various parts of Shelfington. In this video, I'm going to show how I've used my Cricut machine to create some helpful 6-foot wear gauge tools to help me lay parallel track more accurately. The first job was to get the dimensions for the gauge. To do this, I used one of the Pico 6-foot wear gauges as a template. To begin with, I sketched it out into a notebook. I then measured all of the dimensions of the Pico tool using a digital caliper, noting down the measurements as I went along. You may ask, why am I bothering to create my own gauge when I've already got one? Well, this is actually my 4th Pico gauge. I don't know how I lose them or where they disappear to, but the fact is, they seem to vanish into thin air, never to be seen again. It's incredibly annoying hunting high and low, then having to order a new one every time I want to lay parallel track. I know they're not very expensive, but it's not very convenient having to replace them all of the time. And now my hope was that I wouldn't have to. So, the dimensions. Here's what I came up with for the measurements. The rail centres are 9mm apart, hence the tab sections being 8.9mm wide, allowing them to fit between the rails. They are also 1.5mm in depth, so that they can be inserted below the railheads. Set track should run parallel with 26mm separating the adjacent rails of each track, and streamline track should run parallel with 18mm between them. The height of the main body of the gauge is also important and measures 7.5mm. This is important because when the tool is sat on the railheads, this is the recommended height at which a platform should be situated in Engage. Once I was happy that the dimensions of the tool were known, I used the free vector drawing application Inkscape to draw a template. Here I'll pass you over to myself for a bit of live narration as I construct the template. Okay, so to start and build the wear gauge, we're going to take a rectangle tool, and we're going to build a rectangle, draw a rectangle on the screen, and then we're going to make it so that it's 26mm wide and 7.5mm tall. And this is going to represent the distance between our set track. So if we zoom in here, so the next thing we can do is take another rectangle, and this is going to be for one of our tabs, which is 8.9mm by 1.5mm. And these will appear at the edge of our 26mm rectangle. So if I duplicate this and drag it over there, that is our set track shape. Then what I need to do is something very similar for the streamline. If I basically, this one is 18mm wide. I don't really need to bother with the height because I'm only using it as a guide. So if I snap that to the middle, and then I can duplicate one of these, and then duplicate again, and then I can delete that because I was only using it as a guide. What I can then do is just finish this off by adding something about that big. So let's say it's 15 by 7.5, and we can drag that into place, snap it, and then duplicate it and take it over the other side and snap it to that side. So that's going to be the basic shape of our wear gauge. I can then select it all, go to path, and then do union, and then it makes it all one shape. Okay, so I'm now back to VoiceOver. Once I was happy, I saved the template as an SVG file. To cut the wear gauge, I needed to import the SVG file into Cricut Design Space, which was the software used to drive the Cricut machine. Before I pass you over to myself again, here's a quick spoiler alert for you. I'm not the biggest fan of Cricut Design Space. Okay, so now you can see I've imported the image into Cricut Design Space. And one of the problems I always seem to come up against is that it slightly alters the dimensions. So although it's saying that it's 1.05 centimeters, it's actually 1.049 centimeters. And it should be 56 millimeters wide, which is 5.6 centimeters. So what I always do is make sure that I've got my aspect lock proportions set to on. And then if we change this to 5.6, that will change to 1.05. And we're back being in the correct dimensions again. So the next thing we want to do is, I've only got one object, so there's no layers to worry about, so I don't need to attach it for when I cut it, so I can go along and press make it. Another bugbear that I've got with this particular piece of software is that it always chooses this matte, and I don't have that matte. I always go in here and select the A4 matte, which is just a little frustration I've got. I then like to bring whatever I'm going to cut away from the edge, because I'm going to be cutting this out of 2mm Greyboard, so I'm going to have to use painter's tape to stick the matte, to stick the Greyboard to the matte. Okay, so now that we've got the shape in position, we can click continue. And it's found the Cricut machine, and we're going to go with heavy chipboard. Chipboard is basically the American name for Greyboard. We're going to go for 2mm. We've already got that set up. We've got the knife blade in, so we can load the matte. Okay, so that's pressing the button to load the matte. And the machine goes through some preliminary setup stages. Once we've done that, we can press the go button. And we're back to VoiceOver. The thick Greyboard needed the knife blade to perform the cut, and also required 24 passes, so it took a good 10 minutes to cut out the shape. However, the resulting cutout was quite sturdy, and would do the job. While I only cut out one wear gauge in this footage, I later went back and cut out a block of 4 more. Here are several of them in action on my work table, being used to keep some set track straight parallel. Of course, the Greyboard wear gauge wouldn't stand up to as much abuse as a plastic wear gauge, but I could easily cut a new one should one break, or when I'd inevitably lose one. Strictly speaking, you don't actually need a Cricut machine to perform the cutting. If you've got a steady hand, you could print the template onto a sticky label, stick the label onto some Greyboard, and then use a scalpel to cut around the template. Personally, my hand isn't that steady, and I like my Cricut machine, so I'm cutting it out that way. Also, now that we have the dimensions of a weigh gauge for parallel tracks, we can create them for more than 2 tracks. I can see that sort of weigh gauge being very useful for fiddle yards, where several parallel tracks need to be kept aligned. Also, while I've used the Pico weigh gauge dimensions as a basis for my weigh gauge, there's nothing to prevent you from increasing the gaps should you wish to have wider spacing between tracks. No doubt you'll see me using such tools as I progress the build of Shelfington. Okay, so that's about it for this update. If you've got any hints, tips, useful tools or techniques to pass on to a beginner in N-gauge modelling, or if you simply want to say hello, then please do so in the comments section. Anything and everything you've got to say will be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update soon. Bye.